My name is Emma. I'm 31 now, but this story started when I was 30 and 4 months pregnant with my first child. That was when I discovered my husband's obsession wasn't just the gym, it was my younger sister who worked there as a trainer. Before I tell you how I took back my life, my house, and my dignity in a courtroom showdown that left them with nothing, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. I'd love to see how far this story reaches. I'm sitting in my car, parked across the street from a glass building with the words Chin and Associates, Family Law written in discreet gold letters. My hand is resting on my stomach, a protective, unconscious gesture. Inside, my daughter, my sweet Lily, is still just a gentle flutter, a secret promise. In my other hand, my phone feels like a block of ice. It's open to a picture from my latest ultrasound, a tiny, perfect profile that's supposed to represent nothing but joy. But looking at it now, all I feel is a cold, sharp clarity. The kind of clarity that comes after the world has shattered into a million pieces, and you're left standing in the rubble, forced to see things as they really are. My husband, Jake, always said he loved how practical I was. How I never made a fuss. He loved that I was the dependable one, the one who kept our lives running on smooth, invisible tracks while he chased his ambitions. It turns out, he was counting on it. He was counting on me to be the quiet, understanding wife even when he was sleeping with my sister. He was counting on me to absorb the pain, the humiliation, and then quietly disappear. He, and my entire family, made a terrible, life-altering miscalculation. They forgot that practical people are also very, very good at planning. And my plan didn't involve crying in a corner. It involved a very good, very expensive lawyer. This story, my story, didn't start with a bang. It started with 1,000 tiny cuts, administered over a lifetime. It began in the soil of my childhood, where the roles in my family were cast early and never changed. My sister, Olivia, is 4 years younger than me. She's the sun, the star, the one who could conjure tears at will and have our parents rushing to her side, ready to slay any dragon, real or imagined. I was the moon. Quiet, steady, responsible. In my family's language, that was code for the one who was expected to clean up the messes, to anticipate the needs of others, and to never, ever have any of her own. I remember one summer when I was 19, I'd worked 2 jobs to save up for a used car, my first taste of real freedom. The day I brought it home, a modest but reliable sedan, Olivia, who was 15, begged me to let her drive it around the block. My parents urged me to say yes. Don't be selfish, Emma. Share what you have. 10 minutes later, I heard the sickening crunch of metal. She'd sideswiped a parked car, leaving a giant gash down the passenger side of my new car. When my parents came out, Olivia was already in tears, wailing about how the other car had been parked too far out. My father's first words were to her, "Are you okay, sweetie?" He then turned to me, his face a mask of disappointment. "You should have known she wasn't ready, Emma. This is your responsibility." I paid for the repairs with the rest of my savings. Olivia never so much as apologized. The lesson was clear, Olivia's mistakes were my responsibility. My achievements were simply resources for the family to use. Jake, when I met him, seemed like the antidote to all of that. He was charming, ambitious, and he seemed to see me. He saw the way my family treated me and was outraged on my behalf. "You deserve so much better," he'd whisper, holding me close. "I'll always be in your corner." We built a life together, or so I thought. We bought a beautiful house in a quiet suburb. We planned for a future, for children, for growing old together. He was the one who insisted we merge all our finances into a joint account. I'd been hesitant, having valued my financial independence. "Total trust, Em," he'd said one evening, sitting across from me at our kitchen table, holding both my hands. His gaze was so sincere. A marriage is a partnership, 100%. No secrets. No yours and mine, only ours. I'll handle the investments and the long-term planning. You know how that stuff bores you. You're the genius at making our life run day to day. Let me take this one burden off your shoulders. It sounded so romantic, so caring. I wanted to believe in that ours. I wanted that total trust. So I agreed. I handed over my inheritance from my grandmother, my savings, my financial autonomy. It was the single most catastrophic mistake of my life. The gym obsession started about a month after the 2 pink lines appeared on the pregnancy test. Before that, Jake's idea of cardio was a brisk walk to the fridge. Suddenly, he was a disciple at the Temple of Iron. It wasn't just a hobby, it was a religion. It began with 5 a.m. sessions before work, which I tried to be supportive of. But then it escalated. He added a second session in the evening, one that stretched until after I was already in bed. Weekends were consumed by all-day boot camps and specialty classes. Our home, once a partnership, became my solitary domain. I was 4 months pregnant, battling morning sickness and exhaustion, and I was doing everything. Cooking, cleaning, laundry, paying the household bills, assembling baby furniture by myself while my husband was off sculpting his deltoids. My best friend, Sarah, a no-nonsense accountant who could spot a discrepancy a mile away, saw it clearly. She came over one evening and found me on a stepladder, trying to paint the nursery. "Where in the hell is Jake?" she demanded, her voice sharp with an anger I wasn't yet allowing myself to feel. "At the gym," I said, my voice small. "He's training for a thing." Sarah took the paintbrush from my hand and guided me off the ladder. "Emma, stop. This isn't normal. I'm your friend, and I have to be honest. He's avoiding you. He's avoiding this pregnancy. Healthy habits are one thing, but this is an obsession. It's like he's running away from something." I tried to talk to him. I begged him to come with me to a prenatal yoga class. I suggested we set up a small gym in the garage. He dismissed every suggestion. "The gym is my time, babe," he'd say, kissing my forehead in a way that was meant to end the conversation. "It's how I de-stress for the baby." He framed his absence as a noble sacrifice, his selfishness as a form of self-care for our growing family. When I finally asked if I could just join his gym, so we could at least drive there together, his reaction was swift and cold. "No. That's my sanctuary, Em. It's the one place that's just for me." The puzzle pieces, scattered and confusing, began to form a horrifying picture at a Sunday family dinner. My sister Olivia had, a few months prior, announced she was getting certified as a personal trainer. And, what a coincidence, she'd gotten a job at Jake's exclusive, high-end gym. I had genuinely been pleased at first, thinking it would be nice for him to have family there. But that night, I watched them. It was more than just a shared interest. It was a secret language. They were texting each other from opposite ends of the dinner table, sharing small, private smirks. My mother was gushing about how dedicated Olivia was. At one point, Olivia made a comment, looking not at me but at Jake. "You have to be with someone who motivates you, you know? Someone who's on your level. Some women just let themselves go." The comment hung in the air, thick and poisonous. My mother just nodded in agreement. That night, sleep was impossible. The baby was turning flips, and my mind was a vortex of suspicion. Sarah's words echoed in my head. "He's running away from something." I thought about the secrecy, the private jokes, Olivia's cruel comment. And then, another piece slammed into place, so hard it knocked the wind out of me. A few days earlier, I'd gotten an alert from our joint credit card. A charge for over $2,000 at Tiffany & Company. I had asked Jake about it, and he'd been vague. "Just a business gift for a client," he'd said. But at dinner, something had been sparkling on Olivia's wrist. A delicate, diamond-studded bracelet. The dread was a physical thing, a cold weight in my chest. I slipped out of bed and went to Jake's home office. His laptop was on the desk, sleeping. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely type. The password. Olivia's birthday. It had always been Olivia's birthday. "It's just an easy date to remember," he'd always said. Now the excuse seemed grotesque. The screen lit up. His email was open. And there it was. A digital receipt from Tiffany & Company. For the exact bracelet Olivia was wearing. My blood ran cold. I felt like I was going to throw up. I started clicking, my movements frantic. Browser history. Hotel confirmations for business trips in our own city. Restaurant reservations for 2. And then, I saw it. A folder on his desktop, innocuously labeled Future Planning. It wasn't a workout plan. It was a collection of spreadsheets. The main file was titled Asset Allocation Strategy. I clicked it open. My breath hitched. It was a detailed breakdown of our entire net worth. Our house. Our savings accounts. My inheritance from my grandmother, which I had foolishly deposited into our joint account. And next to each item were 2 columns, Jake's share and Emma's share. He had allocated himself nearly 90% of everything. He had even listed my future child support payments as a liability against his projected income. There were other files. Drafts of legal documents. A folder of screenshots of my social media, with notes about my emotional state. This wasn't just an affair. This was a coup. A cold, methodical, meticulously planned overthrow of my life. He wasn't just leaving me, he was planning to financially obliterate me, to leave me pregnant and with nothing. I slid down the wall, my hand clamped over my mouth to stifle a sob. I sat there in the dark, the cold glow of the screen illuminating the anatomy of his betrayal, and I let myself shatter. I cried for the man I thought I had married, for the family I thought I had, for the baby inside me who deserved a world of love, not a battlefield. I let the grief and the shock wash over me in a tidal wave. And then, I felt it. A tiny, insistent kick from inside my womb. A little flutter of life, a reminder of the person who was depending on me entirely. And in that instant, something inside me shifted. The tears stopped. The trembling ceased. The grief was cauterized by a sudden, white-hot rage. He wasn't just going to leave me. He was going to leave my child with a legacy of debt and struggle. He and my sister, the 2 people who were supposed to protect us, were plotting our ruin. I stood up, my legs steady. I took out my phone, angled it at the laptop screen, and with methodical precision, I photographed everything. Every line of the spreadsheet. Every receipt. Every hotel booking. Every cruel note. Then I went back to our bedroom, climbed into bed, and stared at the ceiling until dawn, my mind a whirring machine of calculations. The victim was gone. In her place was a woman with a plan. The next morning, I waited until he was in the kitchen, blending his foul-smelling protein shake. I walked in, my heart a cold, hard stone in my chest. I didn't scream. I didn't accuse. I simply said, "I know about you and Olivia." He didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. He just sighed, a long, weary sound, as if I were a tedious problem he now had to solve. "Look, Emma, I was going to tell you." "Were you?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. "Were you going to tell me before or after you executed your asset allocation strategy?" That got his attention. The blender whirred to a stop. A flicker of pure panic crossed his face. "What are you talking about?" I saw the spreadsheet, Jake. The future planning folder. I saw the Tiffany bracelet you bought her with our money, from our joint account. He slammed his shaker cup on the granite counter, the plastic cracking. "You went through my private files? You have no right." "I have every right to know what you're doing with our future," I shot back, my voice rising for the first time. "With our child's future." And that's when he delivered the final, devastating blow. He looked at me, his eyes cold and devoid of any love that might have once been there, and he smiled. A small, cruel smile. "She's pregnant, Emma," he said, his voice laced with triumph. "Olivia is pregnant. We're going to be a real family. I need a partner who can keep up with me, not someone who just sits at home getting fat." It felt like a punch to the gut. The air left my lungs. A real family. As if our child, the one growing inside my body at that very moment, was somehow a counterfeit. Less real. Less worthy. That was the moment I knew there was nothing left to save. That was the moment the war began. My first call was to my parents. A foolish, desperate act of a daughter who still, after all these years, harbored a tiny, flickering hope that they would finally choose her. I was wrong. My mother listened to the whole sordid story in a chilling silence. When I finished, my voice cracking as I repeated Jake's final, cruel words, her first response was, "Oh, Emma. You have to understand. Olivia is so sensitive. This must be so hard for her, being pregnant under these circumstances." I was floored. I actually laughed, a short, bitter sound. Hard for her? Mom, he's my husband. I am 4 months pregnant with their grandchild. I know, dear, she said in that infuriatingly placating tone she always used when she was about to invalidate my feelings. But love is a complicated thing. Olivia has always been a bit lost. She needs a family to ground her. You're different. You've always been the strong one. My strength. It wasn't a virtue, it was my curse. It was the excuse they used to abandon me time and time again. My father got on the extension, his voice gruff and impatient. "Your mother and I think the best thing to do is handle this quietly. A messy divorce would be humiliating for everyone. Think of the family's reputation. We can't have this kind of drama." There was no comfort. No outrage on my behalf. Just a cold, pragmatic calculation to protect their favored child and their precious public image. My second call was to my Aunt Carol, my mother's sister. She was the family's black sheep, the one who had escaped their toxic orbit years ago and built her own life on her own terms. She listened to the entire story, her interruptions only sharp intakes of breath and muttered curses. When I told her what our parents had said, she exploded. "That's it. You are not spending one more night in that house. Pack a bag. I'm driving down right now. It's a 3-hour drive, I'll be there before dinner." True to her word, she was. She swept into the house like a hurricane of righteous fury, hugged me, a real, fierce hug that felt like the first genuine human warmth I'd felt in days, and then glared at Jake, who was cowering in the living room. As I packed my things, he didn't even come upstairs. He just sat there, texting. Probably her. My third call was to David Chin. I found him online, Los Angeles's most feared divorce attorney. When I sat in his sleek, minimalist office the next day, I didn't cry. I laid out the facts like a business proposal. I showed him the photographs on my phone, the spreadsheet, the receipts, the secret account numbers. He looked at me, his expression unreadable behind his glasses. Then he looked at the evidence, swiping through the images. "He thinks you don't know anything about finances," I said, my voice steady. "He thinks I'm the practical wife who just handles the groceries." He's wrong. A slow, dangerous smile spread across David's face. He leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. "Emma," he said, "this isn't just an affair. This is a premeditated, documented attempt at financial fraud. Your husband and your sister didn't just give us a weapon. They handed us the entire arsenal, fully loaded. Living with Aunt Carol was like emerging from a deep-sea dive. I could finally breathe. She didn't treat me like I was fragile or broken. She treated me like a soldier preparing for battle. We turned her sunny spare bedroom into a war room. We bought a whiteboard and mapped out timelines. I spent my days on the phone with banks, digging through years of financial records, tax returns, credit card statements. I, the impractical one who supposedly didn't understand these things, found my focus. I discovered a web of deceit that was even more tangled than I had imagined. Jake had been siphoning money for over a year, not just into Olivia's account, but into a secret investment portfolio under his name only. He was building a new life on the foundations of the one he was systematically demolishing. A week before the first court date, my parents showed up at Aunt Carol's house, unannounced. They didn't come to apologize. They came with a final, desperate gambit. "Emma," my mother began, her voice dripping with a false, cloying sympathy. "We know this is difficult. But you have to be reasonable. Think of the babies. They'll be cousins." My father, ever the pragmatist, held out a thick bank envelope. "There's $50,000 in here," he said, his voice low. "Cash. Take it. Sign the papers Jake's lawyer sends over. Let them be happy. Don't drag the family's name through the mud over this." I looked at the envelope, then at their faces, a grotesque parody of parental concern. They weren't trying to help me. They were trying to buy my silence. They were trying to pay me off to protect the sister who had slept with my husband and was carrying his child. "You've always been so strong, Emma," my mother added, her voice cracking with manufactured emotion. "You'll land on your feet. Olivia, she's not like you. She needs this." I felt that old, familiar rage, but this time it was pure ice. "My strength is not a commodity for you to leverage anymore," I said, my voice level and clear. "And my silence is not for sale." I looked at my father. "Keep your money. I'm not interested in a payoff. I'm interested in justice. I'll see you in court." The look on their faces, shock, indignation, and for the first time in my entire life, a flicker of genuine fear, was more satisfying than any amount of money could ever be. The day of the divorce hearing, the courtroom felt like a stage, all polished wood and hushed tension. I sat beside David Chin, my back ramrod straight, my hands resting on my very pregnant belly. Across the aisle sat Jake and Olivia. She was also visibly pregnant now, a cruel mirror image of me. They were holding hands, trying to project an image of a star-crossed, victimized couple, torn apart by a bitter, vengeful woman. My parents sat in the front row directly behind them, a silent, stony-faced monument to their betrayal. Jake's lawyer, a slick man with a cheap suit and an overly confident smirk, started first. He painted a picture of me as an unstable, neglectful, hormonal pregnant woman, prone to fits of jealousy and rage. He claimed I was trying to ruin Jake's life out of pure spite because he'd had the courage to find true happiness. I could see the judge, a stern-looking woman named Judge Miller, looking at me with a hint of skepticism, and my heart hammered in my chest. Then it was David's turn. He stood up, the picture of calm, methodical competence. "Your Honor," he began, his voice resonating through the silent room. "This case is about many things. It is about infidelity, yes. But more than that, it is about deception, manipulation, and a calculated, cold-blooded conspiracy to commit financial fraud against my client, a woman who was, and is, carrying the defendant's child." He started with the text messages, projecting them onto a large screen for the whole court to see. The explicit plans, the cruel jokes about my changing body, the dismissive comments about my intelligence. Jake and Olivia squirmed. My mother gasped, a theatrical sound of feigned shock. But that was just the opening act. "Now," David said, his voice dropping, "let's talk about the money." He put up the spreadsheet. The one titled Asset Allocation Strategy. He walked the judge through every line item, using a laser pointer to highlight how Jake had planned to leave me with all the marital debt while taking all the assets, including my own inheritance. He showed the bank statements, the secret transfers to Olivia, the hidden investment account that had been funded with our joint savings. The air in the courtroom grew thick and still. Jake's face went from pale to ashen. Olivia started whispering frantically to him, their united front crumbling into panicked, angry hisses right there in the courtroom. Then, Judge Miller turned her piercing gaze on me. Mrs. Foster, she said, her voice softer now, but still firm. Is there anything you would like to add to this? I stood up, my heart pounding against my ribs, but my voice came out clear and strong. I didn't look at Jake or Olivia. I looked directly at the judge. Your Honor, I said. For my entire life, I was told that being strong meant being silent. It meant absorbing pain and forgiving those who caused it, because they were sensitive and I was practical. I believed that my silence was a virtue, a sign of my strength. I now know that my silence was my consent. It was my permission for this to happen. It was my silence that made Mr. Foster believe he could get away with this. I paused, taking a breath, feeling Lily kick inside me, a small vote of confidence. The final piece of evidence I have is not a document. It's a recording. David pressed a button on his laptop. Jake's voice, arrogant and smug, filled the silent courtroom. It was from a phone call he'd made to Aunt Carol a few weeks earlier, trying to get her on his side, a call she had legally recorded. Carol, you don't get it, Jake's voice echoed, dripping with condescension. Emma is too trusting. She's so wrapped up in this baby stuff she doesn't have a clue what's going on. She doesn't even know how to log into our investment accounts. By the time she figures anything out, it'll be too late. She'll sign anything I put in front of her just to make it go away. A collective gasp went through the room. It was the nail in the coffin. The undeniable proof of his malicious intent, in his own smug, self-satisfied words. I watched as the last bit of color drained from Jake's face. He slumped in his chair as if his spine had dissolved. Olivia burst into loud, ugly sobs. My mother stared at me, her mouth hanging open, as if seeing me for the very first time. Not as the quiet, dependable daughter, but as a woman who had just burned their carefully constructed world to the ground with nothing but the unvarnished truth. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Judge Miller was livid. She didn't just grant the divorce, she tore into Jake and Olivia with a verbal fury that made even David Chin raise his eyebrows. She called their actions a disgusting and predatory display of moral and financial corruption. The final judgment was a total and complete victory. I was awarded the house, free and clear. I was granted full legal and physical custody of my daughter. Jake was ordered to pay substantial child support and alimony, with his wages immediately garnished to ensure payment. The secret investment account was frozen and its entire contents were awarded to me as punitive damages. He was left with his gym membership, his pregnant girlfriend, and a mountain of legal debt. In the hallway outside the courtroom, a scene of chaos erupted. Jake, his face a mess of tears and sweat, cornered me, grabbing my arm. Emma, please, he begged, his voice a pathetic whine. You can't do this. We'll be ruined. Think of my son. I pulled my arm away, my touch recoiling from his. I looked at him, at the man I had once loved, the man who had plotted my destruction, and I felt nothing. No anger, no pain. Just a vast, empty pity. The saddest part isn't that you cheated on me, Jake, I said, my voice quiet but firm. It's that you, and everyone else, always underestimated me. I turned and walked away, leaving him standing there in the ruins of the life he had so arrogantly torched himself. My parents tried to approach me, my mother's face a mask of horrified regret. Emma, we didn't know. She started. Aunt Carol stepped between us, a silent, immovable shield. I didn't look back. I walked out of the courthouse and into the bright California sunshine, feeling lighter than I had in years. That was a year ago. Today, my life is unrecognizable, in the best possible way. I gave birth to a beautiful, healthy daughter, Lily. She is my sun, my moon, my entire world. I kept the house, but I exorcised its ghosts. I painted over the bland beige walls Jake loved with bright, vibrant colors, sunny yellows and ocean blues. I filled it with laughter and music and the smell of baking bread. I excelled at my job. Without the constant, draining weight of Jake's needs and my family's drama, my focus became laser-sharp. I got a major promotion, and my new salary meant that Lily and I would never have to depend on a single soul for anything. But the most important thing I did was this: I started a group. I rented a small room at the local community center one night a week. I called it the Phoenix Circle. It's a support group for women who have been betrayed by the people who were supposed to love them most. We share our stories, we cry, we get angry, and we help each other strategize. We help each other find lawyers, find apartments, find the strength to fight back. I took the poison that was meant to destroy me and turned it into medicine for others. A few months ago, Aunt Carol sent me a link to a local news article. The high-end gym where Jake and Olivia worked had gone bankrupt after a scandal involving the owners. Jake and Olivia had both lost their jobs. I heard through the grapevine that the stress, the public humiliation, and the financial ruin had shattered their relationship. They had split up shortly after their son was born. Last week, my doorbell rang. It was Jake. He looked 10 years older, thin, tired, and defeated. He started to cry on my doorstep, begging for forgiveness, asking if we could try again, for Lily's sake. I listened politely, without interruption. When he was finished, a sniveling mess on my welcome mat, I said, "I forgive you, Jake. Not for you, but for me. I can't carry that anger around anymore. It's too heavy. But the door to that life is closed and locked forever. Lily will always know you are her father. But I will never be your wife again." I gently closed the door, the solid click of the deadbolt sounding like the final word in a long, painful chapter. Today, Lily and I were at the park. She's just learning to walk, and she toddles a few determined steps before tumbling onto the soft, forgiving grass. For a second, her face crumples, and she looks like she might cry. But then, she pushes herself up with her chubby hands, a determined look on her little face. She gets back on her own 2 feet, looks at me, and grins, a triumphant, toothy smile, before taking another wobbly step forward. And I smiled, a real, deep smile that came from my soul. Because I realized that was my legacy. That was the gift I had given her, forged in the fires of all that pain. I had broken the cycle. I wasn't teaching my daughter how to be silent. I was teaching her how to fall, and how to get back up, all by herself. Thank you all so much for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to share, but I know I'm not alone. If you've ever felt underestimated or betrayed, what's one piece of advice you would give to someone going through it right now? Let's fill the comments with strength and support for each other. And if my story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more stories of survival and strength.